Hey everybody, Ben here from the Bonehead podcast, and we've got an unbox and review for you today. We are going to be having a look at the new Fanath High Elf team. So Fanath are a brilliant miniature manufacturer. This is not STL, this is resin. This is proper cast models, and Fanath do some amazing teams. I love their frog team. Their dwarf team is probably still my favorite dwarf team out there, and we've been looking for a decent high elf team for a long time, and we've got it. So we've got the full 16 model version. So what we're going to do is we'll have a look at the models, have a look at the size, have a look at the price, and just enjoy some great Blood Bowl. Okay, so these teams are available on the Fanath website right now. There was a pre-order up, which was a bit cheaper, but there are two versions of this team available, and it's all about how many players you get. So there's the Classic Elf Basic team, which has got 12 players in it. You've got 2 blitzers, 2 throwers, there's a couple of catchers in there as well, and the rest is linemen. So if you're looking to start a high elf team, actually this will cover everything that you need, and for 49 euros with postage, you're looking at probably about £50, which is a lot, but is actually at the same time not a lot for a third-party Blood Bowl team. And then there's also the Classic Elf Full team. So this is the one I bought. This is 65 euros, and you've got all 16 players here. These are the models that we're looking at today. 2 blitzers, 2 throwers, 4 catchers, and what's that, 8 linemen there. Full team for 65 euros. In English money, that's probably 65 pounds for a full team. This is the point at which it's comparable with 2 Games Workshop boxes, if you think about it, and that's probably the best way to do. The cool thing here is that there are no duplicate sculpts. This is just everything you're going to need for your high elf team, and you've got individual sculpts. So 16 different elves, everything you're going to need. Brilliant. Okay, let's open the box and see what's inside. So we should be opening this into 16 resin models. Box-wise, plain. You got the nice little outside slip that we've already kind of seen. Nothing on advertising on the inside, which is fine. Nothing complicated to open, which is also quite fine. Okay, so opening the box, we've got a nice bit of packaging there. And then we've just got, look at that. You can see the crisp detail already, which is pretty lovely. We've got 16 of these lovely resin miniatures. So let's pop them out of the box and have a bit of a closer look. Okay, so we've got the models out, we've laid them all out. What we've got here is 8 of the linemen. Now they're all individual sculpts, so there's no duplicates, which is pretty nice. We've got 4 catchers here, and we've got 2 throwers and 2 blitzers. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at some of the sculpts, have a look at the casting quality, because this is resin, not metal, not 3D printed. This is cast resin, and it's not a grey resin or a black resin, it's a white resin, which is quite interesting. I think the blitzers are probably some of the most popular models. They're probably some of the best models here, because they absolutely smack of old school high elves. There we go. Let's see if we can get a nice shot. I mean, look at the casting quality. Fanath do some wonderful models. The frog team is one of my all-time favorites. The dwarf team is phenomenal, and they have just absolutely crushed it with the sculpting style and detail of these high elves. They are absolutely 100% third edition Blood Bowl high elves. They are so Warhammer. So the casting quality is excellent. The detail is very, very clear. Now it is resin cast, which means there will be some mold lines. So we can see here on the boot, if I can get a different angle on the cap, there is a slight mold line. Now that's not going to take much work with a knife to kind of scratch it off. I'm not going to do that on this video, because I would probably cut my finger on camera, and that would be just awesome. We've got, man, it's been so long since I've looked at cast models like this. I can't even remember what this blooming called. We're going to call it Flash. So this is where the mold, the resin flows through the mold. We've got a bit of flash, so a bit to clip off there, but that won't be too difficult at all. Now, actual size we'll look at in a second, but casting quality on the blitzer really good. We've got 2 blitzers. This one here has got a classic blitzer pose. Now, because these are cast and cast in one piece, which is actually pretty huge, the poses are a little two-dimensional. But as we go through, you'll see some of the linemen like this. There's so much mobility, you really don't recognize it. But this is why the poses are kind of like, they look like the old school blitzer side-on marching pose, is because it's a 2-part resin mold. And I think from the part you actually look and you can see some of the mold lines are very much in line with the kind of thinnest axis of the model. It really doesn't matter. There's not much in the way of mold lines, and the casting quality is brilliant. The resin is really solid. I'm impressed with it. The quality is really good. It feels insanely light. It almost, I don't know, it doesn't, it's really, really light. That's all I can say. It feels lighter than plastic, which is a bit crazy. Now, this here is probably my favourite model from the kit. It just smacks of high elf arrogance, and you get to see some of the great sculpting quality. We've got solid feathers, we've got a little bit of flash on the top here, so there's a tiny bit of cleanup. Now, the other thing to mention about this resin is when it comes to resin, you should wash it before you do anything with it. This doesn't feel greasy at all, which is really interesting. Now, before I paint this team, I'm still going to give it a bit of a wash, and clearing up resin, you want lukewarm water, a tab, like a little bit of soap. Fairy washing up liquid is absolutely fine, and then what you want to do is get an old big dry brush or a toothbrush or something and give them a bit of a scrub. Make sure there's no mold release agent, because when you prime it and go to put your first bits of paint on, if you haven't cleaned up the model, what you're going to do is you're going to end up having that oil slick effect where the deep crevices of the model just repel paint. Not superb. And we've got the other thrower here, great posing. I mean, it's got the 2nd edition Blood Bowl, the 3rd edition Blood Bowl vibes. We've got this slightly large hands that is kind of how old school models used to be, and that is really where Fanath sit. They make, like, if this had come out in 1995 or 2005, it would have been better than anything on the market. As it stands in 2022, it's better than anything on the market as it is anyway. So you're good to go with this. And there's some great poses there. The catchers in particular are very dynamic. So even though they are 2-part resin molds, there's so much movement. We've got all the detail here with the lion. I don't know why I'm pointing. I can just bring it in closer to the camera. Come on, Ben, pay attention. We've got the big old gloves, which easily identify them. And you've got the huge elf boots. Now, this was a massive thing for High Elves. This is the Shadow Warriors. We had Alith Anar from Mordheim, who had these kind of high elf boots as well. Now, we've got a ton of different poses. I don't know what else to show you. There's a ton of different poses and a ton of different armors and genders as well, which is brilliant. It's always great to have diversity. And the High Elf linemen are really important. High Elf team is going to have more linemen than potentially any other team in Blood Bowl. So having a variety in poses is actually really good. Now, these elves, they look really realistic, which is a silly thing to say for Blood Bowl models, but the faces, the proportions, they just look really good. Anyway, I've rambled on. What we're going to do now is have a look at the size comparisons. Now, before we move on to the size comparisons, I just went to base up one of these models. Now, the interesting thing about these models is they come with tabs, which we don't see very often. The newer Games Workshop kits sometimes have them. Most of the time they just have a little bit of a tab. Now, what I mean by a tab is this bit here that goes into the slotter base. What the team comes with are bases without slots, so you're either going to have to cut them open or get hold of Blood Bowl bases. I went to base a few and I was like, that isn't going to work. Or you can clip off the tab. It's really not the end of the world. And in fact, if there was any way round I was going to have it, I would probably like a nice resin model that you can cut the tab off and just glue it onto a solid base. Be aware there's going to be a bit of cutting and sticking when it comes to basing these models, but I mean, I don't know about you. I'm more bored of Games Workshop models coming with with slotter bases with nothing to put into the slotters, like, you know, the Ogre team and the Khorne team and the Dark Elf team. Basically, there's a whole bunch of it there, but I definitely wanted to call it out. And on to the size comparison. So I've got my favorite model here, the Thrower. I think it's probably the best one to go with. And because this is an elf team, I thought the other thing to compare these models to would be one of the Wild Hunters, one of the Wood Elf Games Workshop models. So, I mean, I put this one on a Blood Bowl base as well, just to make sure that we've got the same kind of height comparison, so it works out nicely. But let's have a look at the size of these two models. So, immediately, they line up pretty good. Let's put them on the pitch. I think that's probably the best way to do it. So, from a size point of view, from a height point of view, High Elf guy's got it, but this guy's crouching ever so slightly. That makes a lot of sense to me. As we turn them around, from a mass perspective, the High Elf feels a little bit thinner, but I don't think it's a massive issue. From a size point of view, actually, it's pretty good. Height-wise is decent, and mass is decent. Let's grab one of the Blitzers, and we'll have a quick look at the Blitzer while we've got them here. So let's pop the Blitzer next door to it. Actually, the Blitzer's got a nice bit of heft to him. The armor size is good. The mass feels good as well. And actually, you know what? The Wood Elves are one of the smaller of the modern teams. But this guy is sizing up quite nicely to him. This is bigger than the 2nd edition High Elves, which is a very important thing because they are actually quite small. But let's put him against a human. So we've got the new High Elf Blitzer here. And we've got the thrower from the Imperial Nobility team. Even crouching in a blitzer pose here, this guy is taller. And you know what, mass-wise, he's got a bit more padding on his armor. So the Wood Elf, the High Elf feels a little bit thinner, but actually it makes a lot of sense. And when you're going to have them on the pitch, I think because of the tab, the height's going to be there. They are going to size up really nicely. And I tell you what, let's grab one thrower to another thrower. I wish I'd got Fitzmagic out here. Right. High Elf has got the height. They're a little bit leaner, a little bit sleeker, but definitely very realistic proportions. So as far as the height, the size, the mass, these guys are pretty good. And there you have it. So I really like this team. It's a great elf team. The casting quality is brilliant. The fact that there are 16 different sculpts, that each of the elf sculpts is independent, is really good. Now the cool thing is, and you can see from the designs on the screen now, you've got the catchers that have the longer boots, but actually if you're not using them as catchers, you can mix them all in. As long as you identify what your players are supposed to be, either by painting the rims of the model or using like a WAG name base fronter, you're good to go. Now, I'm a big fan of the 16 model one here. For the price of 2 Games Workshop boxes, you get 16 players, each of them with a different sculpt, and you're covered then for your entire league team. You've got 8 linemen, which is where you're going to be probably at the start of your league, you know, with a couple of blitzers and a thrower, or maybe a couple of blitzers and a catcher or something like that. And then you're covered for adding more and more players. It's actually a really nice treat. The sculpting quality is lovely. This is going to paint up. This is going to be one of the easiest teams to paint up in a while. There's a lot of detail, but it's not too complicated. So there's a lot of scales that are crisp. You've got the pennant, you know, underneath their armor piece, where you've got the kind of edging around it. It's an absolute doddle to paint up. So this is a really cool team. I'm really sold on this. I love what Fanath do, and I love High Elves, and I thought High Elves were going to be landed by Games Workshops. So far, it's not looking like that's going to be the case this year. So I'm a really big fan of this. If you're looking for a High Elf team now, great price, great sculpts, great casting quality, and a great company, really sold on this. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope you pick up some High Elves soon, because I just love them. Anyway, thanks very much. We'll be back soon with more Blood Bowl content. Happy blocking. Thanks very much for watching. We really appreciate your support. If you want to help support the channel even further, please like and subscribe, or come join us on our Patreon. We have early access to content. We get loads of feedback from you guys, and we try and do competitions as much as we can. Or you can get yourself some Bonehead podcast merch on our Spreadshirt site. So if you want to support a team, especially for the Bonehead Championship, you can pick up a shirt, a mug, things like that. It all helps support the channel, and we really appreciate it. Anyway, links below. Thank you very much. Happy blocking.